Mitch Light joins us now. Mitch has been one of the originals, I believe, on the show as we start our 6th season this month. Mitch, of course, is a college football editor at The Athletic. Mitch, thanks for joining us today.
No problem, Chris. And the pay scale has remained the same.
Yes, it has.
Doing this, yes.
It is. Your pay has remained the same. Mine might have decreased a little bit with the COVID situation this year, but in any case, so you've at least got that on me. So
yeah.
Let's talk for a minute before we get into college football. You've got a daughter who is now a sophomore at Vanderbilt. What's that been like on the parent end, just watching all the stuff with that of, are we going to have online classes? Are they going to go in person? Just what was that like going through as a parent and as a family, just waiting to see on all those things?
Yeah, definitely an interesting summer. It was kind of a roller coaster depending on the day, the month, the week, the month, about whether or not things were trending upward or downward. And, Vanderbilt has done a great job. The communication's been great. As most people know, listen to this, most Vanderbilt students in typical normal times live on campus. And, she had a great experience living on campus her freshman year. She had her dorm picked out sophomore year and all that stuff. But then all this changed, and she they tried to get as many kids off campus as possible so they could, have rooms for quarantining and single rooms for freshmen and all that stuff. So she's living off campus with a bunch of friends, and we really wanted her to live off campus because if something happens where they go 100% remote learning, that she's quote unquote away at school. She didn't have to come home and live at home. So she's living, interestingly enough, she is at the building where Athlon Sports, my old job, used to be years ago. We had an office on 25th Avenue right across from the park. We sold that building and it got knocked down. They put some apartments up. So she's living in those apartments right now off campus. One of her 5 classes is meeting in person. And she says it's as normal as it could be in these times. She is, the COVID numbers at Vanderbilt have been good so far, great, so they've done a really, really good job.
Speaking of not normal, this happens to be 9/11, which almost has been an afterthought in the craziness of this year. Where were you when that happened?
Okay, quick break right there, okay?
Sure.
Okay, sorry, my boss. Okay, sorry about that. So where was I? Chris?
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
I had it on mute. Yeah, where were you?
That obviously remember it well. I had it was my first year at Athlon. I started there in February of 2001 and it happened in September. And it was sort of like, I think it happened after 9 o'clock our time or 9:30 or maybe earlier than that, or the news broke. And I just remember, I grew up there. I grew up in New Jersey, North Jersey, my kind of a what you call bedroom community. A lot of people from my small town commuted into New York. My sister lived in Hoboken, still lives in Hoboken, New Jersey, which is right across the Hudson River from Manhattan. So I just remember us all going to the conference room in Athlon Sports, and we had some salesmen who were up there on the road so trying to communicate with them and it just sort of like surreal, just probably like everyone. My daughter Zoe had just been born, so my wife was home with her, and I remember I went home for lunchtime and we just sat there and you watched the news like everyone else. And so yeah, it was I think surreal is just the word that I use. Just looking back, it was crazy.
Yeah, I remember I was sitting in my office. I was in higher ed at the time. I had a private office, and I was just listening to the radio and hearing it coming in. And, of course, nobody knew what was really going on at the time. But that was, I think, the most bizarre day of my lifetime.
I think that's probably a good way to describe it. And I remember, when you have kids, I don't know, it sounds corny, but your priorities change, and we had things were didn't have many worries in the world. Things were good, and I had a job I loved. Just had a baby girl, and then something like that happens, and you just wake up and you don't know what's going to happen for, your safety, the country's safety. Is this how are things going to change? So yeah, it was strange, and then just being glued to the news over the next week probably, and all the stories that came out. And one other thing, it hit home a lot. I think it probably would have been that Christmas time. So 2 months later, 3 months later, went home. My parents live here now. They live in Franklin, but they still lived in the town I grew up in at that time. And seeing ribbons around trees. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional actually. In my hometown of people that died. I don't think there were a lot, maybe 5 or 6, which I'm not trying to diminish that number. There other towns were hit much harder, but just seeing ribbons around trees, just driving around town. So that was strange.
Yeah, it was just an awful time. I think one of the cool things about it was I think sports was part of the thing that helped heal the country a little bit in the coming weeks. It was like the one thing that brought everything back to normal a little bit more.
Yes, and you've seen clips if you've been on Twitter today about George Bush throwing out the pitch in Yankee Stadium, which was awesome, and the Yankees returning. And I'm a huge Yankee fan. In that World Series, they didn't end up winning, but those magical moments against the Diamondbacks at Yankee Stadium were incredible. So it's yeah, I remember the Vanderbilt game against Ole Miss was postponed to later in the year, and in fact, for Athlon, I went down to Gainesville for the Tennessee. I did a behind-the-scenes story with College Game Day on that December, whatever the date might have been, December 1st. The Tennessee-Florida game was postponed from September 11th, and that was a great Tennessee-Florida game. And one of those ended up being Steve Spurrier's last game in Gainesville. So. I remember all those college football games that got postponed till the end of the year as well.
It does not seem like Spurrier's been gone from Florida that long to me.
I know, it's interesting because have you ever seen the guys on SB Nation do that hate and ass Spurrier thing? Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's hilarious. Just Google it. It's basically what Spurrier. It's like his alter ego, or like what he'd want to say. Like, not that he bites his tongue and doesn't say things. So it's just a parody of Spurrier just ripping on every other school. Just Google it; it's funny. Because long story short, I deal with our South Carolina writer at the Athletic, and he did a parody of that about Mike Bobo, the new offensive coordinator at South Carolina, and we were trying to figure out when the hate and ass Spurrier stuff started, and we thought it was at South Carolina, and then that's when I was like, wait, Spurrier left Florida in 2001. There's no way this thing's that old. So, I mean, it was kind of a weird way of agreeing with you. Yes, it doesn't seem like Spurrier's been gone that long.
Let's see. They went Spurrier to Zook to Urban Meyer to Muschamp to Mullen. Is that the progression, or am I missing a coach in there somewhere? Yes, I believe you're right. No. The guy, the former Colorado State coach, is at Central Michigan now. Was after Meyer. Obviously very memorable.
Well, they weren't. I mean, I cannot believe I can't remember. I'm getting too old.
Oh, yes. Good. It's because they
won
was there for 3 years.
They won the SEC East 2 years
Jim
in a row.
McElwain. Yeah.
Yeah, they won the SEC East, but everyone kind of knew they weren't very good. So that's the thing. Not to get keep getting sidetracked. Jeremy Foley did a lot of great things. He was always remembered as, one of the best athletic directors. I think he did a lot of great stuff financially, marketing, and all that stuff. But people don't make enough that he had two. It's hard to screw up hires at Florida, and he hired two coaches or three coaches that did not, that Zook, Muschamp, and McElwain, that had to be fired. Urban Meyer was a slam dunk. Everyone knew he was going to be a great coach. He'd come off, did a great job at Bowling Green, and in Utah, Florida just had to beat out Notre Dame for his services. And so like that, I wouldn't call that a great hire. Obviously it was a great hire, but like anyone could have made that hire. So Florida's made some bad hires in football. Now I think Dan Mullen, I'm a huge fan. That was a great hire, but he didn't hire Dan Mullen.
Let's go to college football. Obviously, it was not a great week one. This week gets a little bit more interesting with the ACC playing. What games and storylines between what has happened so far, maybe what's on the horizon with maybe the Big Ten or wherever you'd like to go, what is it that you found compelling so far about what has happened and what's on the horizon?
Well, no games have unfortunately been that compelling. It's been fun to watch them. I watched the Army MTSU game last week, and then the night game over Saturday, the Navy BYU game, which was just a debacle for Navy. So there really hasn't been any good games or that compelling games. This weekend we saw Miami last night beat UAB, but then you get ACC play starting, and Notre Dame, actually a member of the ACC, hosts Duke, and Clemson's going to Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, Florida State. So a little bit of normalcy because we have some conference games. But I'm interested in following closely what's going on with the Big Ten. Obviously, my job at The Athletic, I deal with 5 college football writers, and one of them's in the Pac-12 and one of them's in the Big Ten. And, it looks like there's a little bit of momentum now for the Big Ten possibly starting in some people say October. I don't believe that. Maybe after November. So it's just, most people, I think most rational people, when we saw what was happening over the summer, we kind of said, we'll be happy with any college football. It's going to be a weird season no matter what happens. I don't know if you want to say there's going to be asterisks or certain leagues are going to play. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be guys opting out. So I still have that point of view. I'm just glad that we're having some football, and it's going to be weird if some of it's in the spring and the Pac-12 plays in the spring and we have college football from September through March or April. That's really weird. I don't want it to be like that all the time, but I'm just going to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's been weird for me, as people know, and as you know, people have listened to the podcast. I've got a nephew who plays at Wyoming. He walked on. He was slated to be a starting receiver this year. It is so weird because what I kept hearing is they were having 0 positive COVID tests basically the entire time. Now, I don't know if that changed as it got later into the summer, but to see their season canceled amidst that, and of course they're one of several schools in the conference, which I understand, was really bizarre. Do you think there's any chance the Mountain West plays? What have you heard on that?
Yeah, there's been so much focus on the Power 5 schools. I don't know. I don't want to even pretend to speculate because I haven't heard. On one hand, I'd say if the other leagues can figure out a way to do it, then the Mountain West and the MAC would follow, but they don't have the financial resources because this is all coming down to, unless there's some vaccine in the next few months, but that's another story and that's another process. It comes down to testing and all of these. The Pac-12 has a deal with that company. I forgot the name of it, where they can test and get immediate results. Pretty much, they can afford that. Can the MAC schools afford it? I don't think so. I don't know that to be true. So it comes down to resources, and a lot of these schools simply, especially the Power 5 schools, can't afford not to play. We had a story, not that anyone really cares about the University of who's listening to this, but really interesting story on the University of Washington's finances and how big of a part that football plays in that. And it's everywhere. It's every Power 5 school, and that's one of the motivations. Now, I'm not saying it's all money. These kids want to play. The coaches want to play. I get that. But, most of us know how college athletics works at the Power 5 level. Football brings in the money and supports all these other programs as well.
Yeah, and what happens if, say, things go wrong with college football and the season's not finished? Obviously, the money is a big thing, as you mentioned. What do you think happens from there with college basketball and college baseball and some other sports if that happens?
Yeah, I mean, I guess your question, if football goes off without a hitch, or it's not going to go off without a hitch. If football goes off okay, then I can see a path to basketball and baseball and all that stuff. I guess your question is what happens if we get to early October and all hell breaks loose and all these schools there's huge virus breakouts and all that stuff. I don't know. I mean, there seems to be a lot of momentum for college basketball, some non-conference bubbles. I think they lost so much money with not playing the NCAA tournament that they'll figure out a way to do that. I think, and I'm far from an expert in all this, but I think that the testing capabilities are improving rapidly by the week. So I'm confident that there'll be some form of college basketball thanks to improved testing, and then college baseball as well. Now, college baseball is a different animal. It's not. It's the least contact of the sports, that the major sports, and doesn't, obviously there's some schools, everyone depends on ticket revenue, and there's some schools in the SEC that depend on a lot of ticket revenue, but playing college baseball with, 10% capacity of crowd isn't that big of a deal. I mean, look at any midweek game at any school, even LSU's and Mississippi State's. There's not 10,000 people in Starkville on a Tuesday game against, Mississippi Valley State. It's not that big of a deal if they cannot play at full capacity or even close to full capacity in college baseball.
I'm in the middle of Blue Ribbon stuff. I'm an associate editor there, and so I'm editing stories of teams across the country, and I also do a lot of the OVC stories. And so I was on the phone for about an hour with a coach in the OVC. I'll leave this guy anonymous. I don't think anything in this is it would really matter, but just for the sake of courtesy, I will. And I was talking to this guy yesterday. He said on their campus it really had not been a big deal in terms of kids on the team testing positive. His thought was that they'd see a season, but he doesn't think anyone's going to start until November 25th or after, which is kind of what we've been hearing between Chris Dortch, who is my boss, and I and some other guys on staff. It seems like the 25th is maybe the earliest start date for college basketball, and I think they hope that they can get in games, from there on.
Yeah, that's the same thing. And you would, with your ties to Chris, and you've talked to coaches, you would know more than me on that. I'm so much in college football mode right now. And, the thing, too, about basketball, obviously you got a smaller team. You got 13 players. You got some, staff members. You basically got a 20-person group. It's not like football where there's, 85 to 100 players and 20 member staffs at least. And so it's far easier to execute than football.
Let's talk Vandy for a minute. There's been a number of opt-outs. I've been told there have been some more that are not public yet. I think I have an idea of maybe a player or two, but I'm not going to share those until I get confirmation. What's your take on their roster situation, their season now with all those defections on top of everything else?
Well, yeah, it's obviously it's been a blow, and it's just the position that's been hit the most. It was going to be a suspect offensive line to begin with, and then you're hit with all that. That hurts. I think it's Cole Clemens is the one that really hurts. The other is just the other guys potentially could have started, but just a depth issue, amount of bodies you have. I was explaining, I was on a show in Gainesville, Florida. They were doing an early season preview with teams around the country, teams around the conference, and I was saying that under normal circumstances, now expectations weren't going to be high at Vanderbilt. I not trying to say that, but this had the potential to be an interesting transition year for the offense, because if you could piece together a semi-decent offensive line or just a normal, healthy offensive line, probably going to have a true freshman at quarterback, you could see maybe some, with a new offensive coordinator, again, that was a big part of it, because, we've talked a lot about this. I'm not one to criticize X's and O's that much because I never played college football. I understand the game to a degree, but there's so much involved. I think we can all agree that, I was a big Andy Ludwig fan. I don't think on either side of the ball that Vanderbilt was as well coached as it needs to be last year. I think they've upgraded considerably on offense. So my point being that with a freshman quarterback, a new coordinator, some young skill position guys, that you could see some light at the end of the tunnel, something like a big transition year. But I'm afraid now with the issues on the offensive line, it's just going to be so difficult to make any kind of progress. And then you have the fact that you're playing a 10-game SEC schedule. You don't have any non-conference games to kind of work out the cobwebs and all that stuff. So it's going to be difficult. I'm interested to see defensively how much better they are. I think they will be better because I think they'll be better coached, and I think they'll, obviously. The talent is better on that side of the ball, and the experience is better on that side of the ball. But there's no sugarcoating. This is going to be a very, very difficult season for Vanderbilt.
Yeah, and I'll try to find a little bit of a positive in here on the offensive side. I think that, and the caveat for this is if they don't get their confidence just destroyed, which I think is a risk. And I think you've got new quarterbacks who are going to have issues with protection. You know, you would hate to see a kid like Ken Seals, who I think is a very promising player for them, either get hurt or get his confidence destroyed from the situation. But you look and you say, okay, on the offensive line, they've lost one of their tackles in Jonathan Stewart. They've lost Bryce Bailey and Cole Clemens, who might have both started on the inside. Bailey's kind of a utility guy. I don't know where he would have plugged in, but I think that was a possibility that he maybe could have started at a guard or been maybe that sixth guy who fills in wherever is needed, as they sometimes have. So you look at those guys, you say, okay, they're going to miss time. Do they come back next year and get that extra year of eligibility? Then all of a sudden you get a boost because you played guys like Ashmore and Braden Babst, some kids like that who I think are going to play almost by default now. You got a guy like Dan Dawkins who's going to get some more time inside. Those sorts of things. You got some freshmen and sophomores who are going to play more as a result of these decisions. Then all of a sudden you start adding guys back in who've been around the program 4 and 5 years. I think you have a chance to see the offensive line potentially get a boost in 2021 if it all plays out that way. I think your quarterbacks all get experience. Again, if confidence isn't shattered, I think that's a positive. You look at the running backs, all those kids will be back the next year. I think the entire tight end room will be back. You've got a lot of young freshmen and sophomores in that bunch. In receiver, I think they lose Chris Pierce, but I think most of the other kids are back. I can't remember with Bostic and some of those guys where they are on the upperclassmen ladder. But point is, you get most of your offense back, and you've got a chance to get some guys who were very experienced who come back next year if they choose to do that. Now, defense is a different story because you've got a bunch of senior starters, and although while you do have a lot of underclassmen backups who will play a lot, so I think that mitigates that somewhat, it does have a chance in some ways to really help them out for 2021 on offense.
Yeah, I agree. You make some good points there. And I'll go back and, I don't never talk to Ken Seals. I don't know, I've read about him. Seems like a pretty tough kid. I go back to Jay Cutler's first year as a redshirt freshman starter. I remember that Bobby Johnson's first game, that Georgia Tech game, was maybe one of the worst offensive performances I've seen. Just looked like a high school team going against a college team. And I don't even know how good that Georgia Tech team was that year. But Jay Cutler was a tough kid. He just kept fighting, and they weren't good that year. They got better on offense every year, and then by the time he was a senior, they had a really good offense. Now, Cutler was a better runner than I think Seals is, and they were able to do some things offensively with Cutler younger in his career to kind of get the offense going. But my point being, if Seals is the mentally tough and like I think he is, we think he is, then maybe that's not an issue. It's easy for me to sit here and say that, don't get your confidence destroyed, but you're right. You make some good points there, and about getting guys back too. With the eligibility, guys can come back. Maybe that's a good thing for Vanderbilt. Go to grad school or get a second major. Get 6 years in college or 5 years in college for some of these guys. So yeah, it'll be interesting, and I'm kind of like disappointed in a way because I thought again with the new coordinator and this offense had a chance to show to be considerably better than it was last year, and now it's going to be difficult.
Let's go to the mailbag for a few questions if you've got a moment, Mitch.
Sure.
Our mailbag is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood. Josh can take care of all your insurance needs. Call him today at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ or at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He is my insurance agent. Give him a try and tell him you heard about it on this podcast. Ann Arbador wants to know, is Mitch encouraged by Daniel Diermeier's public comments regarding athletics?
Yeah, sure. He said all the right things. That's what you'd expect him to say. Like, I believe he means them. There's one thing about saying those, and then what your actions will be. I was just trying to think. I was kind of half joking here, like what would a new chancellor say that would not get people? I mean, I guess you could like read between the lines, and he could be saying the right things and him not really believing it, but every chancellor is going to pretty much say what he said. Now, I've heard some good things about him and all that, so that's a positive. So yes, I guess I was encouraged, but actions, to use a cliche, actions mean a lot more than words going forward. But if he believes and is genuine with what he said, that's obviously a good thing.
It's kind of like spring and fall football practice. I mean, coaches always say everything's great. These guys worked hard. This guy looked good today, whatever. You're right. It's almost hard to screw it up. On the other hand, I will say, at least unlike his predecessor, Nick Zeppos, well, if you skip over Susan Wente, who was also the same way, you couldn't get them to say anything ever about it. So at least, I mean, the bar was on the floor, so there's that at least.
Yeah, and I mean, he went on the radio and said some things there, which was tough to do before. So yeah, and he has. I heard some people when he got hired, it's like, oh, this guy's from Germany. What does he know? Like, you look at his resume, and he even said it. He was at USC. I don't know if it's undergrad or grad school or something like that. He was at Northwestern. I'm not saying it's going to be this radical change, but all of these guys, they know what how important athletics is. Now, will they act on it? Will things change? All that stuff. But it's not just because the guy maybe grew up in Germany. That doesn't mean that he doesn't understand American athletics.
Yeah, I don't think he's an idiot. And like you said, he's been at other campuses. I tend to file it away as mostly meaningless. I've heard all kinds of stuff out of Vanderbilt over the years. The one thing, too, that does make me suspicious is they only play to friendly audiences. Like, he wouldn't talk to Tennessean. The athletic director won't talk to anybody on the record about much of anything. They pick their spots.
She's talked to Joe Rexroad several times.
Well, that's true, but not a lot. And she's not going to answer much in the way of challenging questions. But my point is, they, like Dearmeyer in particular, has picked his spots, and the one talking thing that he's done publicly was with Joe Fisher. Not a knock on Joe, but he's employed by the school, and it was done on the radio station that's going to be their flagship now. So I think if they want to remove a little bit of skepticism, I think they need to start talking to people who might have some tougher questions.
Yeah, fair. But yeah, I'm just trying to think. I don't know a lot of presidents who, maybe that's, I shouldn't say it because I don't know that. I don't know that to be the case either way. How many school presidents talk to local media and all that stuff? So, well,
not a lot, but two things. A, their situation is way different. They've got a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed that doesn't need to be most places. Like most places, the things that schools need to compete are either done already or in progress, which has not been the case there for decades. And number two, you did see some of that out of Gordon Gee.
Yeah, I also say, who the biggest Gordon Gee fan was?
Who's that?
Gordon Gee.
Well, yes, that's true. Yeah. But you did see
Gordon Gee
progress.
Still talks all the time. Yeah, I like Gordon. I thought he was good for the school in the short time he was here. But Gordon Gee was a big fan of Gordon Gee.
Yeah, name a college chancellor who's not, though.
True. People get to that spot. Successful people, whether it's a head coach or president of a university, most of them have big egos.
Columbiano Door says, what is your involvement now with Vanderbilt athletics? Do you still plan on attending games? Could you one day return in dramatic fashion? Well, first of all, I think the next thing that Mitch Light does in dramatic fashion might be the first, but I'll let you bite off the rest of the questions there.
Well, I'm always ready. If Kevin Ingram goes down, gets injured in the game, I could come out of the tunnel like Willis Reed for the Knicks. I'm showing my age, and come limping out and replace him. So now I have. Other than that, I'm an alumni and my daughter goes to Vanderbilt. I have no official affiliation with the school. But my job with the Athletic is much busier on Saturdays. We have season tickets that my wife and my son have always used when I've been the sideline reporter. I will, obviously we don't know what the situation is this year, but in a normal year, I will probably still attend games when possible, and have basketball season tickets and baseball season tickets. So, still go to the games, just will not be on the field this year or anytime. in the future.
That was actually a pretty good answer for dramatic fashion. The Willis Reed imagery there I think was very good. You could maybe start.
I could be. You want to be dramatic? How about the first game at halftime? And again, I know there's probably won't be because of the coronavirus. There won't be in-person or close-up interviews at halftime. What if Kevin's first game back at home, as he steps up to Coach Mason, I come running in and tackle Ingram, shove him to the side, and then perform the halftime interview?
You could do the Tanya Harding thing, maybe.
Yes. Or no, I'd have to have someone do it for me. Yes.
Right.
Volunteers want to take out Ingram.
I'm going to stay out of that.
Okay.
I don't think Kevin has a lot of enemies, so that might be tough.
Maybe the nicest guy out there. Everyone says that, he's the nicest guy. Kevin might be the nicest guy out there.
He might be. We might be screwing up podcast opportunities here because I was going to have Kevin in my rotation too, and so if he catches wind we're trying to take him out on the podcast, it might not go well for me.
That's a you problem, not a me problem.
That is true. I'm thinking of other dramatic ways. Would you employ like a fog machine or anything like that?
No, that's not my personality. No, I don't think so.
We could start rumors about your comeback. I mean, there's all kinds of ways we could go with that. But
yeah, no, I'll just stay behind the scenes. I'm happy.
Let's see. Colombiano Door says, now that you're free to share things that now that you're not formally employed by Vanderbilt, about the current program and the way things are being run, give some strong opinions on our coaches, Mitch.
I don't know if anyone knows my personality, but I'm not a hot take guy. I'm not the most critical guy. So I'm not going to, whether I'm employed by the university or not, I'm not going to, sit there and rip anyone. The numbers are what they are. I like Derek Mason a lot. The numbers aren't what they need to be, and he knows that. The school knows that. This year is going to be very difficult and different, for everyone involved. So I don't know if there's a number, but it's people who cover the finances of college athletics have said this more. There's not going to be a lot of coaching changes this year. I think so. Clearly needs to be better product on the field. Now that being said, they have gone to this staff, Derek Mason, has gone to a bowl game 2 times, which I know there's 12 games and there used to be 11. If Bobby Johnson had a 12th game, he probably would have gone to a bowl game several times. So I guess my answer would be, going forward, what he has done is not enough to keep his job. Like if there was no pandemic and the next 3 years look like the previous 3 years, I don't think he would still, he would not last that long. Now, I don't know how all this changes, but I think he has done a good job shaking up his staff. I like both of the coordinator changes. I don't know if it was just I know he tried to go out and hire different coordinators last year, but I thought Vanderbilt was poorly coached on offense. I know the quarterback situation was not ideal, but you can't tell me that they couldn't have coaxed more out of that group than they had, especially with the talent at running back and wide receiver and tight end. So I know I'm kind of rambling here, but I'm not, I guess my answer would be the product needs to be better.
Mitch, thank you for your time today. I know you've got plenty of stuff to do as you get ready for the college football weekend. Tell folks where they can follow you on Twitter, what's coming up at The Athletic that they might want to read, anything else that you would like to promote. The floor is yours to do so.
Oh, thanks, Chris. I'm at Twitter at Athlon. I don't work at Athlon anymore. At Mitch Light. And did a lot more writing for The Athletic. I hope to do some more. I did some when I was previous to being on the college football editorial team, when I was the managing editor in Nashville and Tennessee. I did some more stuff. A lot of that was because I had time during the pandemic and did some of those historical pieces. You can find that on The Athletic. And actually, if you're not a subscriber to The Athletic, we have a deal celebrating getting our 1 million subscribers. It's only $1 a month, which is an incredible deal. So if you want to go, I did the oral history on Worth Scott's home run, oral history on Shane Foster's 42-point senior night, a Q&A with Corbin, which is kind of old. I did a story on that, the illegal celebration, Earl Bennett play at Florida, when I talked to Sean McDonough, the announcer who did the game. I talked to Earl Bennett. I talked to Bobby Johnson. So that was a fun story. So you can find a lot of my stuff on The Athletic. And again, it's only $1 a month to subscribe right now.
Mitch, thank you so much for joining us. I'll probably take a couple-week break with having you on the show just as we rest all our guests before we dive into football, because then once we get there, and assuming baseball and basketball go off, there's a lot to cover between now and next summer. But thank you for joining us. I look forward to having you as a normal part of our show, as we have done for years. You have been with us from the beginning. Your insight has been appreciated. It's been terrific. You've been a good friend. As much as we joke around, I have a ton of respect for you and have really appreciated your contributions to this podcast. And I'm really excited and thrilled that you will be back with us for another year.
No problem, Chris. I enjoy it. Thanks, bud.
All right, he's Mitch Light. I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast. We will be back again with more episodes next week.